Hi, this is Dan Heisman, and we're continuing with our series of YouTube videos to help you play chess better. We are recording this in the middle of the coronavirus pandemic, so hopefully by the time you're hearing it, everything's okay for people that are hearing it as soon as I make it. Of course, we wish you all to stay safe, try to stay home as much as possible, keep good distance, and so on. And hopefully everybody will get through this okay. All right, so today I thought I'd talk a little bit about complicating when you're losing. And you should take chess principles quite differently depending on the state that your game is in. For instance, principles that make a lot of sense in the opening, like tuck your king away, don't make any sense in the endgame, where you want to keep your king in the action. Similarly, if you're winning or you're losing, you're going to play differently than you would if the game's about even. If the game's about even, you can use your style. For instance, if you like complicated games and the game's about even and you have a move that complicates without creating a problem for yourself, then okay, follow your style. But when you're winning and you're losing, those kind of style preferences a little bit go out the window. We talked in some of the earlier videos about the things you do when you're winning. I won't list them all right now, but the main ones are, think defense first, which does not mean play defensively or passively. I know the word defense and defensively sound very similar. They have similar origins, but playing defensively is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about ordering your process so that you're thinking defense first. The second thing you want to do is keep things simple. Simple favors the person that's ahead. Third thing would be the famous trade pieces, but not necessarily pawns when you're ahead. Okay, but when you're behind, what do you want to do? Well, you want to do basically the opposite. You want to do fire on board, which means complicate whenever possible, because complications favor the person who's losing. If they make a mistake, they're already losing. It doesn't matter. But it makes it easier for the person who's winning to make a mistake and let you back in the game. So you don't want it simple. You don't want to think defense first. You want to do things that give your opponent a chance to go wrong. You don't need your opponent to go wrong when you're already winning. You're already winning the game. If you just play normal moves, you should win. So all these things are quite opposite. And I thought that the game von Wely-Carlsen from Corus 2008 is a good example. And I'd like to thank Grandmaster Andy Soltis for pointing this out when he wrote the article Annotation Reconfiguration for the January 2019 Chess Life. And he looked at the last part of this game, and he used it to talk about annotating a game. A lot of people think if the computer says your move makes your position worse, especially a lot worse, then it's a question mark move. Well, that's true if your game is already good or equal. But suppose you're losing. Then you might make a move where the computer doesn't like your move, but at least it gives you a chance to complicate. And Soltis said we need an annotation mark when we're marking up a game where the loser makes moves like that. And he uses this game as a reference. So with the help of our friend Stockfish11 and with Soltis' help starting from move 30 where he picks up the game, let's take a look at the Van Wely-Carlsen game. Okay, so Van Wely plays d4, Carlsen knight f6, c4, c5 Benoni, d5, b5, Banco Gambit. Now, 2008 is 12 years ago, so Carlsen was, like 16 years old. So he doesn't play the same openings today. I don't think I've seen him play a Banco Gambit for a long time, and maybe this game is the reason. He didn't get such a good opening. And in fact, if you're looking for a way to play against the Banco Gambit, the way Van Wely played in this game is a good model to follow. So Van Wely takes it, c takes b5, a6, these are all book of course, b takes a6, g6, knight c3, bishop takes a6, and now knight f3, d6, g3. The idea on g3 is white wants to push the e-pawn, but he doesn't want black to stop him from castling by taking the bishop, so he's simply going to fianchetto the bishop before he plays e4. Bishop g7, bishop g2, knight bd7, rook b1, and now Stockfish says black's best move is something like knight to b6 to put pressure on the center and then white should play something like a3. Instead, Carlsen plays queen a5, and Van Wely plays the best move, bishop d2. And now Carlsen should put the queen back on c7, but it's not a human thing to do that unless you know that's a book move. So here Carlsen gets himself in a little trouble. He blocks his queen's retreat with knight to b6. Already the Stockfish is saying that if white plays perfectly, it's close to a winning position. Van Wely plays the best move, b3. Now Stockfish suggests Carlsen should play queen b4. Carlsen plays queen a3, and now white's advantage has jumped up to about 1.3, 1.4. White castles, black castles. Stockfish suggests knight e1, and Van Wely finds it. Now the queen again is in trouble. We have ideas of playing knight to c2. Carlsen plays bishop b7, which basically gives the queen a way to escape and also attacks the pawn on d5. Knight c2 hitting the queen, queen back to a6, e4 guarding the center. And white's advantage here is about 1.5, which means if both sides play perfectly, white should probably win. Okay, Carlsen plays knight e8, Van Wely plays a4, Carlsen plays knight c7, Van Wely plays rook e1. Stockfish says white's now up by about 2 pawns. Rook a e8, b4 best move. The idea is if black plays c takes b4, which is his best move after rook takes b4. If black plays like knight d7, white can play knight b5 with giant advantage. So Carlsen decides to just play knight d7 right away. And Van Wely plays knight b5. Stockfish says even better is bishop f1. Carlsen guards the knight. Slightly better was knight takes, pawn takes, and now queen takes looks logical, but after pawn takes pawn, the rook is skewering the queen and the bishop, and then white's threatening c6, and black can't stop all those threats, so black can resign. So black can't do that. So Carlsen just guards the knight. Van Wely plays his best move, bishop h3, pinning the knight, and now Carlsen's game's starting to fall apart completely. For instance, if he plays rook f d8 to guard the pawn, Van Wely can hit the e-pawn. If Carlsen tries to guard it, let's say with king f8, b takes c5, the knight can't take. If the pawn takes, knight c7. If rook takes c7, d6. And this rook is hanging if the pawn ever takes. And black's position completely falls apart. All right, so back to the game. So instead, Carlsen tries to play f5. And Van Wely plays bishop g5. Van Wely's playing some very accurate moves here. His lead keeps growing because, Carlsen's position is lost. Carlsen tries knight to e5. Van Wely takes on c5. Computer says slightly more accurate is bishop takes e7 first. Queen takes a4, nothing better. Knight c7, best move. Rook takes c7. c6, there's a protected passed pawn, always super dangerous. Stockfish thinks that Carlsen should play f takes e4. Now he's looking at bishop c8, which is what Carlsen plays. Pawn takes. And now here, bishop takes is normal. If he takes with the pawn, then Stockfish suggests just bishop e3, threatening to get rid of the blockade on c7. That rook is very awkward. f4, trying to get back a pawn for some play. Bishop takes c8. Rook c takes c8. Rook b4, winning that f-pawn. Queen a5. Bishop takes f4. And white's up about 5 pawns here. He's up 2 pawns on the board, but he has tremendous threats with a lot of positions. So back to the game. So Carlsen decides to mix things up a little with rook takes f5. Normally you'd say, oh, that's not his best move. Computer likes bishop takes f5 better, but he's dead lost with either move. One's -4, the other's -5. So Carlsen says, let's get some imbalance in the position. Let's try to win the bishop pair, and if he takes with the bishop, he's weak on the white squares. And taking with the bishop is not the best move. Von Wely plays the best move, f4, guarding his bishop. Now Carlsen has nothing better than either rook takes g5 or knight takes c6, which are completely hopeless. So he plays knight c4. And here Von Wely can safely take the exchange if he'd like. He plays rook b4, hitting the knight and the queen. Carlsen checks. Von Wely plays king g2. We're almost up to where Soltis starts showing the game. King g2. And Carlsen plays queen c5. Again, bishop takes f5 is perfectly okay here. All right, so Von Wely plays rook to b8. Not quite as accurate as bishop f5, but still plenty good for winning. And now let's take up where we'll augment Soltis's notes with Stockfish. In the book, in the magazine, Andy Soltis says, white has a big edge. Stockfish 9 quantifies it as 2.41. Actually, Stockfish 11, since it's a year and a half later, now says it's actually 4.5. And says black's best move is to play rook f8, which Stockfish 11 agrees with. It says, but if black plays rook f8, white's just going to trade everything off on f8, and the e7 pawn is hanging, and white's just going to win easily if Carlsen goes in for his best move here. So Carlsen understands he can't play his best moves by computer standards because it just leads to an easy white win. What he needs to do is keep things complicated. So he plays knight to b2, hitting the queen. The knight's guarded by the bishop on g7. And Von Wely finds his best move, queen f3. That gives up the knight with check, but white's going to have so many threats on the next move that he'll get his material back. So queen takes c2 check, rook e2, hitting the knight again. Also, that rook on f5 is still hit, the bishop on c8 is still pinned. So Carlsen plays his best move, queen b1, but now Stockfish says that white's advantage after bishop takes f5 is up to 8 pawns. Bishop takes f5. Queen takes f5. Okay, so was knight b2 a bad move? No. See that even though the evaluation for black went down, Carlsen's just trying to keep it complicated here. He's trying to look for some ways to get back in the game. He's just throwing monkey wrenches in the position. So here Von Wely finds his best move, g4. Again, the queen can't take because of the sneaky pin. Queen takes g4 and the bishop's pinned. It's not really guarding the queen. So queen f7. Again, Von Wely finds his best move. Bishop takes e7. Black's position is completely falling apart. That d6 pawn is in big trouble. Carlsen plays h5. Stockfish says, just take it. G takes h5. And lots of ways to win here. Von Wely plays a move that's not bad. He plays bishop takes d6. Instead of having a 9-pawn advantage, he only has an 8-pawn advantage. And Soltis says, no wonder the Stockfish says white's advantage is ballooned to more than 7. It says, but black, Carlsen, the world's best swindler, is finding moves that most likely would work against a human. Suddenly there are ways to lose his advantage. For instance, after h takes g4, even though Stockfish says white's down 10.5 pawns, if he plays queen takes g4, then queen takes d5 check lets black back in the game. So here white's best move is queen to b3. White plays queen to e4. And white's threatening to just trade queens, which would certainly cause Carlsen to resign. So Carlsen plays king to h7. And now Stockfish says white should just take 2 pieces for a rook and play rook on b takes b2. Instead, Von Wely now plays bishop takes c7. Okay, so it's pretty hopeless to play queen takes c7 and allow rook takes b2. Even if bishop takes b2, he doesn't even have to recapture. He could just trade queens with queen e7 check. Game over. So black's thinking about whether he should resign here, but he tries another trick. He plays bishop f5. Now white has several ways to win the game here. For instance, the computer thinks that rook h8 check might be the best, because after bishop takes, you can force the trade of queens with queen e7, and these connected passed pawns mean that the two pieces for the rook are no match for the pawns, and white's up 10 pawns here. If black plays, on the other hand, king takes h8, his only other legal move, then queen e8 check, queen takes c8 check, rook takes e8, king h7, and again after d6, white's pawns are becoming queens, and black has absolutely nothing. So rook h8 check wins the game right away by trading queens. In the magazine, Andy Soltis says that white can reverse the move order and play queen e7 first and allow queen takes d5 check, and then after king g1 there's no perpetual check. Obviously the bishop can't move because it's pinned. Suppose the queen tries to check on d1, king f2, queen d4 check again, king g3, queen g1 check, king h4, and no more checks, and white's threatening all kinds of things here. So, you know, I can understand Van Wely doesn't want to do that. You know, he's thinking he has easier ways of doing than playing queen e7. I think rook h8 is more clear, but the computer and Andy Soltis both agree that queen e7 is completely winning. All right, and here Van Wely, probably in a little time trouble. Remember, most Grandmaster games are played with 40 moves in so much time. So here Van Wely's probably short on time, and he plays the terrible mistake queen e3. And now, all of a sudden, Carlsen's back in the game. Queen takes d5 check. And now what can white do? He's got problems. This bishop's not pinned right now. It can get into the game. For instance, suppose he plays... well, his best move, believe it or not, is to allow the queen to get pinned to the king with king g1. So let's take a look at that. King g1, best move. Bishop d4. And now here comes that rook h8 check again. Okay, if bishop takes, then white's winning with a move like bishop e5. And if king takes, then bishop e5 check forks the bishop and the king and saves the queen. And here, white's not winning easily anymore. After queen takes e5, f takes e5, bishop takes e3, rook takes e3, knight c4. Stockfish says white's lead is only about a pawn. Not an easy game at all. All right, so back to the game. That's the best move, but that's a hard move for a human to play, is to voluntarily give up his queen for a bishop here. Instead, he tries to get out of things with king to g3. And Carlsen now plays knight to c4 exclamation point. And believe it or not, it's now white in trouble and not black, because the knight is in the game, the queen's threatening to come in, and white doesn't have any immediate attacking moves that are going to be as strong as he did before. So here, Stockfish says the best move is rook d8, and if queen takes c6, best move for black. Queen b3, almost impossible to find these moves, especially if you're a little short on time, although this may be the end of time pressure. Queen takes c7, and now rook to d5. And Stockfish says black's probably winning after knight d6. Instead, white plays queen f2, and now black's coming in. Queen d3 check. Completely winning for black. So 3 moves ago, white was up by about 10 pawns. Now black's up by 16 pawns. That can happen when things are very complicated. People are in time trouble. They don't have time to think about the best moves. But give Carlsen a lot of credit for throwing all these monkey wrenches into the attack here. King g2, bishop e4 check. Look at all these pieces in the attack. The bishop can come in. The knight can come in. Too many. Rook takes e4, queen takes check, king f1, queen d3 check, queen e2, knight d2 check. And now white resigned. Why did he resign? Well, if he plays king f2, then the bishop comes in with check and removes the guard on the queen. If he plays king e1, then knight f3 check, king f1, knight takes h2 check, king e1, bishop c3 check, king f2, and now g3 check removes the guard on the queen, and it's going to be mate in a few. So after knight d2 check, von Wely resigned. Okay, so Soltis writes at the end of his article, how would you explain what happened? He says a computer would blame the move queen e3, which is true, was a really bad move. Would also say after queen e3, queen d5 check, that king g3 was a really bad move. And after knight c4, it would say that white should try that desperate move rook d8 to at least have a chance. Notice he really doesn't have any move. Let's say he moves the queen along the third rank, just to show you what would happen here. Let's say he plays queen to b3. That's another critical line because we're looking for moves that keep guarding against queen f3 check, because queen f3 check, king h4, queen h3 check, king g5. You know, there's mates then with queen h5, or so you have to guard the f3 square here. So let's say it plays queen b3, black to play and win. And this is not in the magazine article that Soltis has. So let's take a look. Queen h1, not a check. Interesting. Threatening to play queen to g2 check, and if the rook goes in the way, then he probably has more checks. Let's see here. So it says white's best move is bishop e5, queen g1 check, rook g2, queen e1 check, rook f2, and now simply capture knight takes e5. And if he takes, taking back with the bishop check is probably going to be mate, if not winning all the pieces. So he can't capture back. Not easy to see for sure. Okay, so that's interesting that Carlsen didn't choose to play queen b3. I'm sorry, Van Wely didn't choose to play it. But again, this is 41st move, so we assume that he was out of time trouble here. But, he's even if he plays perfectly here with rook d8, he's still in big trouble. So, as Soltis says, the computer would blame moves like that. He says true, but he would also credit the fact that when Carlsen was in trouble, instead of playing the computer's best moves, he played knight b2, which, if we let's show you Stockfish's analysis here. So let's show the top two moves. All right, so here Stockfish 11 is not as unforgiving as Stockfish 9 was. Carlsen played knight b2, and even though that's one pawn worse than rook f8, the best move, it's at least the second best move. Of course, one pawn worse is a lot worse. So Soltis would give this like a squiggle, meaning best try when you're losing. And then he says queen f3, queen takes c2, and now again the computer says queen d3 might be best, but it also says queen b1. Now he says queen b1 is best. So I have the little advantage over Andy that my computer's a little faster and my Stockfish is a little newer than when he wrote the article. So queen b1 is not just a squiggle, but it's actually the best move. And then a couple moves later, king h7, he says that deserves a squiggle, and again Stockfish says, well, yeah, you're losing no matter what you play, but king h7 is the best of a bad lot anyway. So it's true, those are best moves, but those are also hard moves to find when all you're trying to do is just keep the game complicated. Just keep throwing monkey wrenches in and see what happens. Because as long as the game's complicated, you got a chance. Once the smoke clears and you're way behind, then resign starts to come into play. All right, so hopefully today's game was a lot of fun. Magnus Carlsen, of course, is a very popular player. We're not only in the middle of the coronavirus pandemic, but we're also in the middle of the candidates matches, which started today. I saw that Wang Hao already beat Ling Diren in the first round. So we're in the middle of, there's going to be a lot of people watching the chess matches because there's no, outside sporting events. No baseball, no football, no basketball, no hockey, no golf, no tennis. So, chess is a good sport to watch. So tune in on the candidates tournaments. If you don't know how to find them, just go Google candidates chess, and you could go to ICC or chess.com. For instance, let me show you here on the ICC how you would do it. You go under Window, Events. Here's the 4 games. Look like Nepo just beat Giri. You can just click on Join to see the game. You can go through it, and you can see at the end of the game, Black had a queen versus a rook, and he threatens to take off that rook and win the king and pawn endgame. And White resigns because he can't keep the rook on the board. Probably rook e1 doesn't work very well. Let's just show you what would happen. Obviously, rook takes, pawn takes, king here, king here, king here, king here, resigns. So he can't take the queen. So Nepo wins. So that's how you do it on the ICC. But every big server, chess.com, probably Lee Chess, all those other guys, they're probably all showing this. You could watch it on YouTube as well. So it'll be they're playing in the Russia. I almost said the Soviet Union. They're playing in Russia. So the games are going to be mostly early in the morning for the people here on the Western Hemisphere. Okay. So thanks for tuning in. If you liked the video, hit the like button. If you would like to subscribe, hit subscribe. Oh yes, we have 1 day left in our subscription, in our contest for subscribers, where I'm giving away 2 free lessons. So just email me via my website, danheisman.com. Put on in the subject matter, chess lesson entry or chess lesson contest. It seems to be working really well. Last time people didn't do that, and a lot went to my junk folder. So far, none of the entries have gone to the junk folder, thank goodness. And tomorrow's the deadline. Tomorrow is Wednesday, March 18th, 2020. At the end of that day, the next day, I'm going to get all those emails and I'll put them in chronological order, and then I'll have the computer pick out a couple random numbers, and I'll announce the 2 winners on Facebook and Twitter. If you're not following me on Twitter, I'm at Dan Heisman. I have my chess tip of the day. Thanks a lot. See you next time. Bye.